And let's bring on Bill Bailey.
The 1 millionth copy of Tequila.
Nice applause for the cause known as the Silhouette.
The 1950s gave birth to rock and roll, doo-wop harmonies, and rhythm and blues sensations that shaped modern music. Yet, not every band that emerged during this golden era achieved lasting success. From the Crows to the Nutmegs and the Students, despite talent and early hits, they quickly faded into obscurity due to changing tastes, poor management, or stronger competition. So, join us as we explore the 25 famous bands from the 1950s that failed miserably. The Crows are often remembered as pioneers of doo-wop, yet their story is also one of fleeting fame. Formed in New York, the group reached stardom in 1954 with their massive hit G, a song widely credited as the first rock and roll record by a rhythm and blues vocal group.
Sets are not the only things that can be brought back and used again through ingenuity and a little rearranging. This particular tune is not a new one. It was brought back and it's healthier and bigger than ever.
Despite this groundbreaking success, the band struggled to follow up with another major hit. A mix of poor promotion, limited recording opportunities, and rapid changes in the music industry left them unable to sustain their momentum. Within a few years, the Crows faded from the spotlight, overshadowed by stronger acts like the Platters and the Drifters. Their brief rise and fall highlight how even innovators can vanish quickly. While the Crows' fleeting rise and fall showed how one early hit could vanish in the whirlwind of 1950s music, another vocal group briefly touched success through a single memorable track. Could the Rays sustain their moment any better? Unlike many forgotten acts, the Rays actually left behind a cultural imprint with their 1957 hit Silhouettes. This catchy tune became a doo-wop classic and was later covered by artists like Herman's Hermits and Cliff Richard, proving the song's longevity.
Really be keeping you away from a great treat. What? With as many Broadway appearances and nightclubs and theaters throughout the country? I bet you've seen them before.
Yet, the Rays themselves could not capitalize on this moment of glory. They lacked consistent management and recording support, leaving them unable to deliver further hits in a highly competitive market. The group continued to perform for a short time, but none of their later songs gained real traction. By the early 1960s, they had slipped into obscurity, remembered mainly for one timeless track. Their career shows how one great song doesn't guarantee lasting success. Few 1950s bands enjoyed a debut as explosive as the Silhouettes. In 1957, their single Get a Job soared to number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts, selling over 1 million copies and becoming one of the defining doo-wop hits of the decade.
But ladies and gentlemen, a nice warm welcome for Philadelphia's own, those Get a Job boys. Here they are, the Silhouettes.
Yet, after this lightning strike of success, their career collapsed almost instantly. Follow-up singles such as Heading for the Poorhouse failed to connect with audiences, and the band's sound was quickly overshadowed by newer, more polished groups. Despite attempts to recapture the spotlight, they never repeated their initial triumph. The Silhouettes became the quintessential one-hit wonder, proving that topping the charts doesn't always lead to long-term survival in the music industry. In 1958, the Crescendos briefly captured America's attention with the dreamy ballad Oh, Julie, a song that climbed into the top 10 and sold over 1 million copies. Originating from Nashville, the group showcased smooth harmonies that fit well into the late 50s doo-wop landscape.
One of the nicest things that can ever happen to an artist, these fellows can be rightly proud. It's their first gold record for their first record.
However, their success was tragically short-lived. Lacking strong managerial direction and follow-up hits, the Crescendos quickly disappeared from the charts. The group also struggled to stand out as rock and roll evolved, leaving their style sounding dated against the new wave of emerging acts. By the early 1960s, they were virtually forgotten, with Oh Julie remembered only by devoted doo-wop fans. Their career is a textbook example of how fast fame could evaporate in the 50s. Sometimes a single spark defines a group's entire legacy. For the Monotones, That spark was their quirky 1958 novelty hit, The Book of Love. With its catchy "I wonder, wonder, who" refrain, the song became a doo-wop staple and earned them fleeting fame.
And the fellows who made it a hit are here tonight. This is number 5. I wonder.
Yet, despite this promising breakthrough, the group never managed to create another charting single. Their attempts to replicate the charm of Book of Love fell flat, and audiences quickly moved on to more versatile acts. The Monotones' lighthearted style lacked the staying power of groups like the Coasters or the Drifters. By the early 1960s, they had vanished from mainstream recognition, remembered only for one unforgettable tune that outlived the group itself. Energy and spontaneity defined the Champs, best known for their instrumental smash Tequila in 1958. Remarkably, the song was recorded almost as a filler track, yet it became a #1 hit and won a Grammy.
This is a gold record. Not too many people get them. And I'll read you the inscription. Presented to the Champs in appreciation of the 1 millionth copy of Tequila.
Riding this unexpected success, the Champs attempted to replicate the formula with follow-up songs like Too Much Tequila, but none matched the impact of their breakout hit. Despite lineup changes and talented musicians, including future stars like Glenn Campbell, the group never reached the same level of success again. Within a few years, they were labeled a one-hit wonder. The Champs' story illustrates how unpredictable the industry could be, with chance hits sometimes eclipsing a band's true musical potential. The Champs rode unexpected fame yet faltered when repetition failed. So, when the little-known Vox Poppers briefly surfaced with Wishing for Your Love, would their promise lift them higher, or would obscurity swallow them faster than their peers? Unlike many better-known 1950s acts, the Vox Poppers are remembered only by dedicated doo-wop historians. In 1958, they briefly surfaced with their lone hit Wishing for Your Love, which earned regional airplay and modest national success. Unfortunately, the group lacked both the financial backing and industry connections to maintain momentum.
With the power of television, they just intersected, and he went to he ascended to this level of fame that no one had ever been to before.
Recording opportunities were scarce, and the market was saturated with countless vocal groups competing for radio play. As trends shifted toward more polished and marketable performers, the Vox Poppers faded away almost as quickly as they appeared. Today, they stand as a forgotten example of how even a promising sound could vanish without sustained support, proving that talent alone was rarely enough to guarantee survival in the 1950s music scene. From Long Island came the Aquatones, a group that offered something slightly different in the doo-wop era, a female lead singer, Lynn Nixon, whose soaring vocals gave their 1958 ballad, You, an emotional depth that resonated with audiences. The song became a moderate hit, distinguishing them briefly in a male-dominated genre.
There were fewer like solos and stuff like that. It was a little more, had more like rhythm to it and percussion, so it was like something like Velvet Underground was kind of like...
However, their originality wasn't enough to ensure long-term success. With little managerial direction, no follow-up hits, and limited promotion, the Aquatones quickly slipped into obscurity. The music industry's fast-moving nature meant there was little room for groups that couldn't deliver consistent chart performance. Today, the song You survives as a cult favorite among collectors, but the Aquatones themselves remain a largely forgotten chapter of 1950s music history. Emerging in the mid-1950s, the Pastels seemed poised for a promising career when their debut single, Been So Long, became a hit in 1957, reaching the top 30 on Billboard. Their smooth harmonies captured the essence of the doo-wop sound, earning them attention from major labels. Yet, their success was shockingly short-lived. Subsequent singles failed to chart, and the group never managed to replicate the magic of their debut. Without consistent management or strong promotional backing, they quickly disappeared from the national scene. By the early 1960s, the Pastels were largely forgotten, remembered only by dedicated collectors of doo-wop records. Their career remains an example of how one bright moment could not secure long-term survival. Few groups of the 1950s went through as many lineup changes as the Hollywood Flames. Formed in Los Angeles, they spent much of the decade struggling to gain a foothold in the competitive doo-wop market. Their biggest hit came in 1957 with Buzz, 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 a lively number that briefly brought them into the spotlight. However, constant personnel shifts and inconsistent promotion prevented the group from achieving stability. Although future soul singer Bobby Day, famous for Rockin' Robin, was once a member, the band itself never maintained momentum.
A great performer, a man that has a great hit record these days called Rockin' Robin, Bobby Day. Hi, Bobby. Well, I've been real fine.
By the early 1960s, the Hollywood Flames had fizzled out, overshadowed by better-managed West Coast groups. Today, they are remembered only as a footnote in doo-wop history. The Hollywood Flames unraveled despite sparks of talent. So, when the Royal Teens captured national attention with the cheeky short shorts, did they have the versatility to expand their appeal, or would novelty trap them in the shadows of history? The Royal Teens story proves that novelty songs can both make and break a career. In 1958, they stormed the charts with Short Shorts, a playful track celebrating teenage fashion. The song became a cultural moment, peaking in the top 5 and securing the band a place in rock and roll history.
And now the Royal Teens singing their big record, Short Short.
However, the group was unable to transition from novelty appeal to lasting artistry. Subsequent singles, including Believe Me, failed to reach the same heights. Although members like Bob Gaudio later found success with the Four Seasons, the Royal Teens as a band faded away. They remain an iconic example of how one catchy, light-hearted tune can overshadow the rest of a group's work. The Spaniels hold a curious place in 1950s music history. Hailing from Gary, Indiana, they became one of the first groups signed to VJ Records and scored a notable hit with Goodnight Sweetheart, Goodnight in 1954.
Whole lot of great things, and you all know Goodnight Sweetheart, Goodnight. We got all of them here for you tonight. Make them feel good. Here come the Spaniels, ladies and gentlemen.
The song became a doo-wop standard and was later covered by numerous artists. Yet, despite this auspicious start, the Spaniels struggled with financial mismanagement and inconsistent promotion. Internal conflicts and the rapidly changing music industry made it difficult for them to sustain success. While they continued performing regionally into later decades, their mainstream career stalled. The Spaniels' inability to capitalize on their strong debut illustrates how even talented groups with major hits could slip into obscurity. The Penguins are often remembered for one of the greatest doo-wop songs ever recorded, Earth Angel. This tender ballad became a nationwide sensation, climbing into the top 10 and selling over 1 million copies.
Some have become rock classics, like this one. Real love song, baby. Earth Angel, and here to perform it, the Penguins.
Yet, despite such a monumental start, the group never managed to follow up with another significant hit. Their label, Doo-Tone Records, lacked the resources to properly promote them, while stronger rivals like the Platters and the Penguins' own management disputes weakened their standing. Attempts at recapturing their early magic failed, and they soon slipped from mainstream charts. Although Earth Angel remains immortal, the Penguins themselves are widely considered a one-hit wonder, remembered for a single song rather than a lasting career. The Penguins proved that even monumental songs didn't ensure survival. So, when the Willows delivered Church Bells May Ring, did they finally carve out resilience in a crowded market, or stumble into the same fate of obscurity? Not every 1950s group with talent could secure staying power, and the Willows are proof of this harsh reality. Formed in Harlem, they achieved their greatest success with the 1956 hit Church Bells May Ring, which reached the national charts and became a recognizable doo-wop staple. Unfortunately, legal troubles and disputes over song rights consumed much of their energy, stalling further progress. Their record label provided little stability, leaving them unable to effectively market follow-up singles. The Willows continued to perform regionally, but could not adapt as rock and roll rapidly evolved.
We also have the Willows with us tonight. And this group goes way back into the 50s, right? Way back into the 50s.
By the early 1960s, they had faded into obscurity, remembered primarily by nostalgic doo-wop fans who still treasure their one shining success. The Valentines represent another cautionary tale of lost potential in the crowded 1950s vocal group scene. Best known for the upbeat Lily Maybell and Woo Woo Train, they showcased a playful and energetic style that captured audiences for a brief moment. With members like Richard Barrett, who later worked behind the scenes with the Chantels and Frankie Lyman, the group seemed destined for bigger things. Yet, constant lineup changes and a lack of consistent recording opportunities prevented them from achieving lasting fame. While they influenced later acts, they never secured the chart success needed to sustain their career. By the close of the decade, the Valentines were gone, their promising spark dimmed before it could truly ignite. The Danliers burst onto the scene in 1958 with their single One Summer Night, a smooth and romantic doo-wop ballad that became a nationwide hit. The track sold over 1 million copies and briefly catapulted them into the spotlight.
They will be reacting to the Danliers.
Okay.
One Summer Night. These guys just blew me away. Oh my goodness.
The Moon of Love.
However, the group was unprepared for the demands of sudden fame. Signed to a small label, they received poor promotion and had little financial or managerial support. Their follow-up singles failed to gain traction, and internal struggles soon followed. Within just a couple of years, they had disappeared from the national stage. Today, the Danliers are remembered as a quintessential one-hit wonder of the 1950s, their entire legacy tied to a single dreamy summer anthem. The Students, formed in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1957, were a doo-wop vocal group best known for their classic hit I'm So Young, which later became a staple for major artists like the Beach Boys and the Ronettes. Despite this early success, the group failed to sustain momentum in the competitive music scene of the late 1950s. Internal challenges, lack of strong promotion, and limited recording opportunities hindered their growth. Their other singles failed to chart nationally, and they were overshadowed by more commercially dominant acts like the Platters and the Coasters. Although they had talent and influence on future musicians, the Students faded into obscurity shortly after their debut, making them a classic example of a 1950s band that failed miserably. But when the Drifters emerged with soulful harmonies, would they conquer instability and lineup chaos to dominate the scene, or fade like so many other hopefuls? Few bands endured as much turmoil as the Drifters. Founded in 1953, they combined gospel-influenced harmonies with rhythm and blues, scoring early success with Money Honey. But instability plagued them. Members were frequently replaced, sometimes en masse, turning the group into a revolving door of singers.
That last song, Clyde, you and Joel wrote.
That's
what motivated you to write a song with such a positive gospel lyric?
Though they later scored timeless hits like There Goes My Baby and Save the Last Dance for Me, much of their success came under different lineups, leaving the original incarnation largely forgotten. Legal battles, management disputes, and shifting rosters prevented the Drifters from building a cohesive legacy in the 1950s. While the name survived into later decades, the original group's inability to stabilize makes it a prime example of squandered early potential. Every 1950s fan recognizes In the Still of the Night, recorded in a New Haven church basement in 1956. This haunting ballad by the Five Satins became one of the most beloved doo-wop songs of all time. Yet, despite creating what many call the national anthem of doo-wop, the group struggled afterward. Draft obligations, lack of a strong label, and poor promotion hindered their ability to follow up. Their other releases failed to chart nationally, and they were overshadowed by more consistent groups like the Platters.
For your entertainment, the one and only Fred Paris and the Satins, singing their hit recording, In the Still of the Night.
Ironically, while their one hit remains immortal, The Five Satins themselves faded from the mainstream by the early 1960s, cementing their place in history as a one-hit wonder. Hank Ballard and the Midnighters were no strangers to controversy. Their risque 1954 single, Work With Me, Annie, was banned from many radio stations for its suggestive lyrics, yet it sold over 1 million copies. Despite this explosive start, the group struggled to maintain steady momentum. Follow-ups like Annie, Had a Baby brought attention, but typecast them as scandalous rather than versatile artists. They later recorded The Twist, but it became a global sensation only after Chubby Checker's cover overshadowed them.
Guest that came in today for us, his name is Hank Ballard. He's the leader of the group Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. Some of you older folks may remember Mr. Ballard from the 1960s, sir?
Poor timing and industry politics robbed the group of the recognition they deserved. By the end of the 1950s, they had faded from prominence, remembered more for what could have been than what was achieved. The Nutmegs, a doo-wop group from New Haven, Connecticut, emerged in 1955 with their soulful ballad, Story Untold, which gained regional popularity and showcased their smooth harmonies. They followed up with Ship of Love, but despite their talent and potential, they struggled to achieve lasting commercial success. The group faced poor management, a lack of proper promotion, and the rapidly changing music landscape dominated by rock and roll and better promoted acts. Internal challenges and limited recording opportunities further stalled their career. While their songs remain cherished by doo-wop enthusiasts, the Nutmegs failed to break into mainstream stardom and faded from the spotlight, earning them a place among the many promising 1950s bands that ultimately failed miserably. But when Buddy Holly and the Crickets pioneered self-written rock hits, did they secure an unshakable legacy? Or would tragedy cut them short before greatness fully blossomed? The Crickets, led by Buddy Holly, revolutionized rock and roll with their innovative sound and self-written hits like That'll Be the Day and Peggy Sue. They influenced the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and countless others.
They tell me that if we behave up here in the north, over Christmas, Texas is going to permit us to come back in the Union. Is that right, fellas? Here from Lubbock, Texas, they're Crickets with one of their hit records.
Yet, tragically, their success was short-lived. In 1959, Buddy Holly died in a plane crash, ending the band's momentum just as it was beginning to soar.
Investigators may take a new look at the day the music died. New information may lead the NTSB to reopen the plane crash.
Though the Crickets attempted to carry on, they could never escape Holly's shadow, and without him the group quickly faded from the charts. Despite their massive influence, their career arc ended prematurely, making them a case of talent and innovation cut down before its time. Longevity eventually became their story, but in the 1950s, the Isley Brothers struggled. Their early single Shout, 1959, would later become a party anthem, but upon release, it wasn't a major chart success. The group spent much of the decade hopping between labels, unable to find a consistent hit formula or financial backing. They were overshadowed by polished doo-wop groups dominating radio airplay. Although they eventually reinvented themselves in the 1960s and beyond with Motown and funk, their 1950s years were defined more by failure than triumph.
Until then, Jim O'Neill saying thanks for watching. Good night, everybody. Here are the Isley Brothers with our Shindig finale.
Back then, the Isley Brothers were just another struggling act trying to survive in a crowded, unforgiving music industry. The Dell Vikings emerged in the mid-1950s as one of the first racially integrated vocal groups, blending African American and white members at a time when such integration was rare in the music industry. They quickly gained attention with their 1957 hit, Come Go With Me, a doo-wop classic that showcased their tight harmonies and catchy melodies. However, despite early promise, the group's career was plagued by internal disputes, lineup changes, and contractual conflicts with multiple record labels. Follow-up singles failed to match the impact of their debut, and the group struggled to maintain a cohesive identity.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the legendary, fabulous Dell Vikings.
By the early 1960s, the Del Vikings had largely faded from mainstream charts, remembered today mostly for a single timeless hit. The Five Royales were highly respected among musicians, blending gospel-inspired harmonies with rhythm and blues grit. Songs like Dedicated to the One I Love and Think later became big hits when covered by artists such as the Shirelles and James Brown, but the originals never gained widespread traction. Despite being ahead of their time, the group never broke into the mainstream. Poor promotion, lack of radio play, and the dominance of bigger labels left them overlooked. By the end of the 1950s, they had slipped into obscurity. Ironically, their influence on soul and funk was enormous, but commercially, they failed miserably, remembered as innovators who never enjoyed the rewards of their creativity.